I want people to realize when I was young and I started to learn there was prejudice, I thought, well, I'm so young. By the time I get old, it won't exist anymore. People are going to realize that everybody's the same.
Yeah, it'll die out.
And it's 2020, and sometimes I think, is it worse or is it better? And it breaks my heart.
Right. And I think, I was thinking about that too. And you worked at Ryerson for years. I'm gonna get into like their whole origins and all that.
Yeah.
But you worked at Ryerson, so you were right in the heart of downtown Toronto. It's a university downtown. For those of you who aren't in the GTA, and you saw it. That's as diverse a city as it gets, right? So that would probably reinforce the fact that people are people, because you saw every walk of life passing through those doors.
Yeah, I mean, Yonge and Dundas, and like you said, for anybody not familiar with the GTA, is considered the heart of the city. I mean, that's the Times Square of Toronto, to put it into perspective for anyone else listening in. And first of all, being at the university, there's diversity. You have to learn and respect diversity working in a university. So that's something that came natural to me, but it's something that's very, very much practiced, of course, in a university. But just being at Yonge and Dundas, those days you'd go out for lunch or go out for a walk, it was every single type. And I have to say this, though, I never really started to look at anyone as they looked different until somebody made me aware that someone who looked different might be different. And I kind of hate that, because it gets put into people's minds. Now, if it's maybe me or you, to us, we grow from that. A lot of people will take growth from that, but it scares me that even in 2020, there might be others who don't take that diversity and see that everybody is the same. I have two words you might notice that I have now in all my tags. I used to have a lot of things, and I don't say them because I think they're fluff words, and unfortunately they're used so much they might come across that way. But here's the reality: it's love and peace. The only thing I remember, God rest my mother soul, who this month will be 15 years she's gone, she taught me two things: love everybody, be peaceful, everybody's the same. And she didn't speak any English, Martin. She was from Italy. She had no education at all. But I'll tell you, one of the smartest, most educated people I ever met was my own mother, who taught me all these life lessons that decades later came back to show me and say, I don't know how she saw or why she was like that, but now I have that much more of a love and respect for her, because as a child, you don't really get your parents. It's my mom, who cares? If she says it, it's probably not true. But it was incredible to see how she led me down a path and made me realize it doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what nationality they are. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter if they sell their souls in the streets. You never call them names. You never say horrible things to them. You just don't know where someone's been. Yes. And that's how I grew up.
Right. And yes, we could just end it there for the day.
Yeah. People call me Coach Kennedy, and that started many, many decades ago. But it's basically, I'm Kennedy Lodato. These days, Martin, until 5 years ago, I worked at Ryerson University. I spent about a decade there. I was in their recreation department, and I ran personal training courses there. And my goal was to bring education there. That's one of the reasons we crossed paths a lot. I was always running out to see what was out there so I could gather stuff and bring it in. When I left Ryerson about 5 years ago, we just parted our ways. Ryerson had one vision, I had my own vision, and as much autonomy as they gave me, I needed to grow, and my growth had to be on my own. And all I've really done differently is the first couple of years I left, I was still doing a lot of strictly education. I taught for a lot of companies. I really, really enjoyed that a lot. It was a blast. I mean, you know that. And then the last couple of years, I moved more into the coaching side. I realized that it wasn't just the education that was valuable anymore. In fact, education's free. Go on YouTube, and anything that I can teach you, you can find on YouTube, or you can buy a book.
Right.
But I started to see the real value in taking education and teaching trainers how to apply it. Because when you teach for 15 years and you realize you're giving people education and they don't really know how to apply, you start to scratch your head and say, maybe you can't just throw stuff at them. Maybe what they need is guidance. Maybe what they need is some coaching. And even if they've never actually educated with me, they still have all this education. And I found a lot of trainers and coaches just didn't really know how to bring it together. So there were great concepts, right? And I saw, not that I saw it as a niche, as a market, I realized and said, and this is going to sound horrible, but I felt like I was doing something wrong, that I wasn't giving the coaches and trainers what they should really have. And I said, no, education is in the way. And I went into mentorships. So mentorships was basically certain dates you come in and meet. I did that for a year and a half, and I realized those worked great. But then I also realized about 8 months ago that one-on-one coaching is maybe the way to go, and that's basically what I do. So when a trainer or a coach who's maybe been in the industry a couple of years or fairly new wants someone to give them guidance over, like a lot of the people I coach are over 12-month periods. They want guidance. They want a mentor. They want someone they can spend with every moment of the day so that I can reflect on them. Not just how I train or my ideologies, but also I'm trying to instill some of my own philosophies about, leading with love and peace and how you are with people and how you should speak to clients.
That's true. And I, the few things, when I was working at Lifetime, I was their education specialist, a regional education specialist. And I found that I valued those times, those 8 hours a day that I was spending with new trainers for 5 days, and just really instilling as much as I could. And the things that they take away from that isn't just, this is how many reps, sets, and time under tension. It's those kind of off the schedule conversations when you start talking about your family, you talk about how to love or how to show respect for people. And those intangible pieces are really what help to tie together the information that people are getting. Because I think, like what you said there, it's not for a lack of information, it's a lack of application of that information.
Absolutely. There is a ton of information available. I have a colleague of mine who, we all know this, but he continues to remind me. I might ask him a question on, how do I change this in PowerPoint? He says, there's this incredible channel. It's called YouTube. You can literally punch in anything, how to learn how to do, and everything pops up. So then I start to realize, well, then that means philosophy's there, education in terms of ideologies of exercises there, the tools are there, everything's there. So you just said the magic word. Well, if it isn't the education, then where's the real value? And it's the coaching. You're right. It's the conversations that people take away most. The stories, how you instill the education is what matters most. Absolutely, Martin.
Right. Because, reality is, I think that even though we're fit physically, we're getting obese with information.
Absolutely. We are in overdrive with information. Trainers are bombarded with information.
We're taking in way too much, and there's not enough output for the input.
Yeah, not enough time to absorb it, not enough time to go out and try it. I don't know, maybe your thoughts. Even though that's the way we learned, I have to tell you, something about it maybe was different. Maybe because there was less social media, because let's face it, there really wasn't in those days with us. I don't know. Maybe people didn't learn it or apply it as much, or maybe the crowds we were around, I thought they did a great job at it.
Yeah, now that you say that, I think that part of it was we were conditioned. Like, for example, if we went to a workshop, right? We go to that workshop, we take our notes, we write it down, because we don't know the next time we're going to get some more information. So we paid more attention, because I know that this one workshop is coming up in 6 weeks, and the next workshop might be for another month and a half, unless I drive somewhere, whatever. So I'm pulling this in. Whereas now, if I go to a workshop with you, I could be like, I could just take a couple snapshots of the slides. I can find it on YouTube. I don't have to actually try and remember it, because I know that it's accessible somewhere else. So I never internalize it.
Yeah, you just made me realize something that I still preach, but you just kind of brought it together. You're right. You know what I used to do differently that I do preach to trainers these days and coaches, to people I come across, even when I do any sort of education? So me and you took a course together. We went to do something with Peter Twist, and he's teaching us some kind of ideologies. And you're right. We get a manual. We don't get videos. We get a manual. We're taught that day how to do most of them. You better learn how to read and follow instruction.
Right.
But here's what I remember you doing, and I know me doing, is we went out and we practiced that stuff.
Yes.
We went out and we didn't just use it on others, but right away we started to practice and get into it. And I spent countless hours using resistance bands and all kinds of tools. When we were using Bozu, the Vipers and things. And I'm not, I mean, we use them these days, but I think that's the difference. I think trainers, you're right, they come, they don't really pay as much attention because they don't need to. They know there's videos available, the manuals, everything is online. They can always follow up with instruction later. So maybe that's what it was. Maybe we were more attentive, and maybe we knew we had to dive in right away and learn how to use it, because Peter wasn't going to be there tomorrow to answer my question, unfortunately, and Martin might not be there. And it wasn't just, you know, let's quickly hop on a Zoom call. Yes, we could call each other, but to show things, we had to wait till we saw each other as well. Great point, you see?
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. We're figuring out the problems of the world right now.
Oh, yes.
So as we were talking before, you mentioned a word, like you were saying that as you're coaching people, you're focusing on the physical, the systemic, the emotional, and the mental.
Yes.
And I was like, physical check, mental check, emotional check. Can you unpack systemic?
Yeah.
Like, what exactly do you mean by that?
So let me kind of bring you up to how I got to that. So when I was 26 years old, it's just easier to tell how old I was. I'd never gone to a gym before. I played sports. I didn't see the point in being an athlete and going to the gym. It just didn't work that way in those days. Not really. I met a friend. He told me to go to the gym. I went to the gym. And the reason I went to the gym is I had a shoulder injury. I had hurt my shoulder. He says, you should join the gym. If you do, your problems will go away. Okay, I said, I'll join the gym. I went. He took me through a workout. I was sore for 2 weeks. It was a leg day. And my life changed. Now, what I realized was, Martin, my path wasn't just the exercise. Even prior to that, I was already on a journey to find health. My goal was I wanted to live till I was 120 years old. So that's really where it started. And then I thought, okay, I thought playing sports was maybe what it was, but maybe he says exercising in the gym is part of my secret. So that was the physical. And for me, the physical brought a lot more than just the physical. Truthfully, the biggest thing I got from training in those days, confidence. It made me realize I could change my physique. And I thought, well, if I can change my physique, which I never, ever, ever, ever thought was going to be possible, I think I can do anything now. So when people say, oh, well, you got big, it was bodybuilding, I go, yeah, I know that's what you saw on the outside, and that's great. But for me on the inside, I was still looking for health. I thought it was health. I thought training like a bodybuilder was specifically just health, right? That was my ideology. So I thought as long as I had that and I had the, you know, that sort of ideology, I was headed towards health. And that's really where the path started for me. So first it was bodybuilding. And then, of course, we started to do more of the athletic stuff when we ran into each other, which, again, to me was another step. And this is not to say if you train like a bodybuilder, it's bad. What it means is there's a time and a place for everything. Yeah. If you want to move like an athlete, don't train like a bodybuilder. If you want to look like a bodybuilder, don't train like an athlete. And it's a continuum, right? Exercise continuum on extreme ends. Yes. I'm now really in the center. So for me now, it's really, really, truly, I think always has been, but I started on opposite ends. And it's brought me in the center now. And for me, it's about health and wellness, real health, not fitness. Fitness is my PR. Health is different. I can be fit and not be so healthy. And if we have time, we'll get into a bit of a story for myself. So that started to make me look for different things. And I started to find different things. And then it was exercise. And then I started to realize how emotions played a role. And then I listened to people who are motivational speakers. And I found other educators. And then I found a number of years ago, Dr. Emily, who talked about feet, but she became more integrated. And she got into cool things about, like her tagline at her company is brain, breathe, bare feet. And people go, breathe and bare feet and brain, well, what's this? What do they have to do with each other? But there's a big mass. So all of it, Martin, for the audience, is really just been my path towards something. And then a couple of years ago, well, 10 years ago, let me step back quickly, I've been fascinated with fascia. Fascia has been a big fascination. Everything I could learn, read, anything, and I'm still crazy about it. But it was always from our perspective. I have a colleague of mine who started doing what I'm going to call bioenergetic testing. Testing with a machine called an EAV unit. It tests really for meridian lines. So you have to really understand and believe these ideology. And what they test for, some of it had to do with lymphatic system, and I'm being real quick here. But he brought up a word that basically said extracellular matrix. I said, whoa, hang on a sec here. Yes. I know extracellular matrix from a movement perspective. He says, movement perspective. Didn't you realize it's also, its relation to your lymphatic system, and what we test for is the health of the extracellular matrix. Now, to make a long story short, for those who go look at, and this might be news to you as well now these days with all the new research, every single thing that happens in the human body is all going to be affected by how your extracellular matrix is in terms of its health. Now, that is a massive statement I'm making there. That means what I looked at something that was just physical also was systemic. Your lymphatic system that cleans you out is a systemic thing. Organs are systemic. If you believe in chakra in Indian ideologies and philosophies, you look at an organ that's located here as your heart, but that the heart also has a connection to something emotional, which has a connection to something physical. So they all tie in. And if people say, well, make some connections for me. Well, if I eat real bad, then I'm really, 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 really stressed. My brain does these really weird things, and these certain types of proteins and enzymes in my body stop producing or produce too much of, and my stomach starts to get something we refer to as leaky gut. And this leaky gut is basically holes in your gut, for simplicity, that open up and stuff gets in, like bacteria that's not supposed to. But it also means good stuff gets out, like nutrients. Well, your gut is connected to your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is this a primary nerve that runs up to your brain, which now means it's mentally affecting me. So Martin, when I think a certain way, when I'm under stress, like the things that are going on in the world right now, that will lead to affecting my stomach. So this is how I start to realize with my colleague, and I have something I do with him, which is a different company, which we can discuss, and that his testing has to do with really testing internal. And I start to realize then, well, internal is directly related. In other words, everything is connected. If you have a physical injury, let's start with, if you have a chronic injury, I told you the causation model we follow is from top down. It starts here. It may manifest itself somewhere down the line as physical, but it started here. You don't believe me? All right, let's work backwards. Think about your posture. Think about if your feet start to fall inward. They invert, or whichever way they end up. They create an imbalance. That's going to change my shin position, my foot position, my shin position, my femur position, my hip position, my diaphragm position, how I breathe changes. And if I breathe more through my mouth, I'm sensing more fight or flight. If I'm sensing more fight or flight, it's going to affect me systemically because my nervous system is ready to go out and kill or be on hold for something, which then means things like fat released into your blood because your body's going to need energy. So this is what I start to see, how everything kind of connected. So my ideologies in the last couple of years have been, well, hang on. If Martin is a stockbroker and he's at work all day and he's extremely stressed all day, and now he's listening to what's going on in the world all day, and he's really like this all day, well, if he comes to train with me, even if he's online training, even in today's world right now, and I don't take a few minutes to realize that you as a human are and calm you down, I have you in fight or flight, I'm not doing you any justice as a coach to train you, because cognitively, you're not going to really remember stuff that well. Your brain is too concerned about protecting itself from something that doesn't even really exist. So this is where I start.
No, sorry, just sorry to interject there. That makes perfect sense to me, because I have a gentleman that I train who is in his 70s, and he does some plies with me. We do some personal training. And then the other day we got into a conversation about Black Lives Matters and about the stressors that are in this world, which for his world, being a British guy who understands multiculturalism and doesn't get all those things are happening, he needs to talk it through. And our session, probably a good 3/4 of our session was just talking it through for him to understand from my perspective what I'm feeling. And Martin, it's his piece to understand, but he needs to understand it from my perspective for him to move forward, because that stressor was just churning in his body as we started to talk about it.
Yeah, and that's happening with our coaches, and then the coaches are obviously talking to the clients, and that's the consumer, because I speak to my coaches and I know what they're going through, and that's a lot of the conversation. Is a lot of times it starts here, and then it's let's get them down here so they can absorb, because they get asked these questions. Look what's going on. So that's where I started to make all the connections, and that's why today, like we spoke a bit about it, it's concerning for me, because people are stressed. And whether it's like your client you spoke of, who his heart is in the right place, but he can't really make sense of what's going on. And if you as a coach, you don't need to know. Look, I'm not asking you or anybody to be a psychiatrist or psychologist or try to get into people's heads, not at all. But just to be aware that it's important to understand, as long as Martin is aware that Martin's mental state, Kennedy's mental state, is going to affect him emotionally, if it affects me emotionally, and that those emotions are going to also release chemicals. Emotions are chemical toxins. That's what happens when they're bad emotions. So as long as Martin understands that his thoughts will affect him emotionally, which can affect him physically, which can affect systems, heart, lungs, liver, other things, because think about posture. So we can get crazy with it. As long as Martin is aware of it, then Martin at least will take 5 minutes to want to speak to his client and say, let me maybe, like you said, see it from your perspective so we can get some insight in how things are. You've done your client a justice that is probably, like you said, more important and more valuable than the physical training part of it anyway, because if you trained him and it was just physical, what would he really have taken from it?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it is pretty incredible. So that's where my journey came to, and this is where I am today, is that systemically, your lymphatic system is systemic. Your heart is systemic. Liver, kidneys are systemic. Let me say something crazy. I'm going to give you an example. If you ever have a client, or someone has a client where you've done everything you can and you've done correctives in terms of trying to fix an injury. So I have a shoulder injury that has an issue. We look at the shoulder injury. Martin can't figure it out. Nothing works. Okay. Someone tells Martin, hey, Martin, look at the opposite hip, because there's this contralateral connection through tissue. All right. That doesn't work. And so he tries to do something with the hips and the shoulder. It's still not working. Then someone says, well, hey, Martin, go down to that opposite side foot. Maybe something's off of the foot. If the foot is off, everything else is twisting. You're creating some obliquity, maybe in the body. Martin tries everything. His client is still patient, and Martin can't figure this friggin' thing out, and he thinks maybe I'm just beyond what I'm doing with him. Maybe Martin needs to consider this. Is your client emotionally or mentally really stressed? Because what if the trauma of emotion is what's tied in his shoulder? And this might sound fluffy to some people. It's not. That's why we have people who do energy work, Reiki workers, and all types of things, types of people like that out there. The stuff really exists. I have personally seen people in a group of people I coach on a business which is called Quantum Health Institute. It's something else we're doing, where they have seen Reiki workers, Martin, have had injuries for years, and the injury goes away once they've spoken to someone and released emotions. So all the great things you're doing with this type of information that we're speaking about today, and how you had on yesterday, and so on, this is all fantastic, because it gives people an opportunity to see how people are being affected, whether it's and if it's with clients and it's with coaches, how the physical is affecting the chemical or the systemic or the mental, or vice versa, how the mental now is affecting everybody in this chain, this causation all the way down.
Yes, and that's exactly it. I mean, at the end of the day, we still have to show up. Like, I mean, the world is still moving on, and we're doing our best to bring awareness to things. And last week I had some fantastic speakers on, but still, I still have a client at 12 o'clock today. Like, it doesn't matter whether I preach, whatever it is, like, I still need to show up. So how do we show up?
So, like the way I'm telling my people to show up, the way I would tell people to show up, like you said, your client was a little, I don't know how to really act or be.
Process
and when, how do I process it? So for me, again, it sounds simple, but when I'm not sure myself, my mom always taught me and said, look, if you just lead with love, if you lead with your heart, with whomever you're speaking to, and this is my mom telling me this, and you listen, because that's why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should do more listening than speaking. This is what she taught me to do. She says, if you do that, you can't go wrong. Because even Martin, if I don't understand what prejudice is, if I don't understand what's going on in the world, if I'm ignorant to it, but I don't know what it means to have a side or take a side, or should there be a side, if I listen, ask questions, listen, and lead with my heart, then you can't really go wrong. And that might be a safe place, and I'm asking people to end up is, well, I do want them to, because it is a sensitive time. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want people to get hurt. It's crazy. I don't want anybody to be affected that way. So I'm telling them, lead with your heart, and if you're loving and peaceful, then there's no reason why. I mean, maybe I'm a dreamer. You can't work out anything, and unfortunately that's not the way the world works. But I will say this, you doing what you do though, this is when people say what difference does one person makes, it does, because today I'm one more person with you out here. Today there's one more person who's listening. Today we have one more person on our team. And if as a society we all think the same and we believe in manifestation and laws of attraction, then you're right. By doing this is good, because we see a lot of the bad all the time when you watch news, but how about some of the good stuff that's happening out there? We don't see enough of it. I'm so glad you do this, because this gives us an opportunity to put that kind of energy out there. So it's my hat's off to you for taking the time that you do all the time to take and invest all your efforts to making these things happen.
Thank you, Kennedy. I did a count. My wife actually did a count, because I never really stopped to think about how many people I've had on. You might be like the 51, 52, like the 52nd, 53rd person I've had on since this quarantine started. Like it's crazy. Like we're up to 60 different people that have been on, just sharing their stories and bringing their messages. And it's humbling to just ask, and people just say yes. And
I mean, I'm honored. The minute you asked, you like, as soon as you said, or would you like to come on, I said, sure, absolutely, anything at all. It's because there isn't enough of this, and it's very. I think you used the word, you used it before. Very Starbucks, right? Let's just sit down. Let's have a realistic chat, because you keep saying it. Coaches have to show up. People still have to show up, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, and there is a lot of that now that things are starting to open up. How do you show up? How do you handle something? How do how do we go from worrying about COVID to worrying about these other things that are happening in the world? It's unfortunate. I don't want to sound cheesy, Martin, but and don't get me wrong, I'm a happy person 99.9% of the time, but I have to reflect, and sometimes, and then you're gonna think it's weird. Me and my wife cry. I cry because I can't stand the sight of seeing a fly get killed, because listen, if you're a vegan, you don't want people to eat animals because animals are alive, you're going to think this is weird. Well, to me, plants are alive as well. So to me, everything has life. Anything that grows has life. I mean, the Japanese believe everything has life. You give life to anything, even if it's artificial intelligence, so that they even look at things differently. So I'm really glad. And almost 60 people is incredible. Yeah. Is this going to be ongoing for you after the quarantine and everything? Like, I mean, I don't think you should ever stop. This is great.
As long as there's people who want to talk, I'll keep it going. I've put it in my schedule. I block up this time. 9:30 to 11:30 is core conversations time, right? And as long as people want to talk, I'll open it up for people to talk. The days I don't have anyone scheduled, I just call it a freestyle day, and I'll just share summaries of the people that I've had on in the week or the past little while. And it's been good, man. It's been life-giving for me, because as you know, my background, like beyond personal training, is counseling. And there's a selfish side, like full disclosure, I miss that connection with people. So like this feeds my soul to just be able to catch up with Kennedy, knowing I can't drive to Burlington or downtown and just hang out with you in some workshop, right? So this is scratching my itch as much as it's feeding those who are watching. So yeah, love it, man.
Hey, listen, if you're going to be selfish, and selfish means you're giving something back, then be as selfish as you need to be, because sometimes it's what brings out. Look, I preach to people like, look, here's something I will preach to others as well. People say, is it good to be selfish? I go, well, here's why I think you have to be selfish on some level. I personally want to give back. I'm always trying to give back. It doesn't matter whether it's an age thing, whether it's a color thing, whether it's an ideology thing. I always want to give back because I feel grateful. Just like you. You may think it's selfish, and maybe it was from your selfish need. But here's the reality. If I'm not selfish enough to look after myself, to give myself the ability to do it, if Martin is not selfish enough to look after himself and give himself the ability to say, I have to do something for myself, then you would not be giving back right now. So I welcome your selfishness because it made you say, let me do something that makes me connect with people. And in that, look what you've started. And you might, I don't know, I mean, you see it as something that started during quarantine, and I don't know. I love the name, first of all, Core Conversations. And every time I kept seeing it, I go, what's this Core Conversations? How come I'm not on there? This sounds like pretty cool stuff he's doing there.
Yes.
I don't know. It sounds to me like a podcast is somewhere, like something YouTube, Spotify, and I would gladly have tons of people I'm sure would want to come speak with you, especially with the type of topics and the things you bring up, and especially at a time like this when things have been very sensitive. Your heart has been so open to let trainers and coaches realize, like even with your guest yesterday, to realize about, how do you show up, and what do you say to your trainers and coaches? What do you say to the people? How do you make them be accommodated in this world? Yes. I mean, it's got to be very, very challenging for people. Let me ask you, as a colored man, how because I always am curious to learn. How is it through your eyes? Because through mine, disgusting. I can't believe that in 2020 it still happens. It's shocking to me. Shocking. What about you?
It's one of those things where I feel this has happened my whole life on some scale. And it's now on a world scene right now where everyone is seeing people get shot, and you see the violence on a massive scale. But it's the same thing for me, that systemic racism, when I would go into a convenience store and go to this back to find something. And as I'm walking between the aisles, I see the owner at the other end of the aisle walking with me. You know what I mean? And so when I see that as a kid, or if I'm driving my car and there's a police car coming the opposite way, and then he spins around and pulls me over to say, oh, you had a broken taillight. It's like, well, how did you see my broken taillight if you're coming towards me? Or, when a bunch of my friends were playing basketball actually we're going to run at the field. So there's 4 of my friends. 1 of them is white, 3 of them are black, and we're getting ready to go on the track, and a police car comes up, and he pulls over and he says, he winds down his window, he goes, hey, you guys going to play some basketball? And we're like, no, we're actually going to go run on the track. He's like, okay, fine. He just drives away. And then my friends, we put our shoes on and start to go. And my white friend's like, what was that? I was like, well, what? He's like, well, he's just assuming because of some black guys, you guys are going to play basketball? And we're like, yeah, that's our existence, right? So we just shrug it off because that's what happens. And our white friends are just disgusted by the assumptions and the profiling and those things. Whereas for me, it comes to a point where you almost shrug it off when you're a kid because you saw it. Even like that little post today, like did you see that on my stories from today? Look it up. I just put it up there, guys. There's a little kid playing basketball in his driveway, and he looks down the street and he picks up his ball and stands behind the Jeep. Cruiser goes by, and then he goes back to dribbling his basketball.
Oh God.
So
how old is the kid? And I mean, I'm going to see it, but how old is the kid we're talking here? A couple years old?
My guess is he's probably like 12, 13. Like, didn't look like he was so the things that I see now in this world don't surprise me because this is my existence. And it's magnified, and I'm happy that people are now more aware of what's been happening our whole lives, and I'm happy to see that it has space, it has airtime, and I'm excited to see even things like petitions to change the name of Dundas Street. Petitions to change. You see that? Petitions are now one out for Vaughan. There's a little town, for those of you watching, there's a town called Vaughan, a little city called Vaughan. And that gentleman, Benjamin Vaughn, has other things throughout the world that are named after him. When the anti-slavery movement started to happen, he was pushing back against it because that meant that he would lose his commerce. He lived in Jamaica, and one of the major events that happened in Jamaica was when they started to burn all the sugarcane fields. One farm, there's 420 slaves that escaped thanks to the Maroons and thanks to this revolt. Benjamin Vaughn owned that farm.
Wow.
So now people are like, wait a minute, why are we elevating this guy? Why did we change our civic holiday on August 1st from Civic Simcoe Day to Vaughn Day? People are like, wait a minute, who was this guy? So when I look at my personal experience with racism, and then I see what's happening in this trend and this shift in our culture, I think the lasting effects will be when people start to open their eyes and recognize that, wait a minute, this guy Dundas was, did some atrocious things, and he was just trying to get some money, and that's why he had everything in his name. This guy Vaughn was a slave owner. Those are some permanent changes as people now become more aware. So our voice is changing, and police brutality and those things are going to continue to exist until people realize that leadership flows from the top down. That guy who got shot on Friday, not only the cop that should be fired, his boss should be fired, his boss's boss should be fired, and the boss's boss should be fired as well. I said that wrong, but the reality is that everyone above him should be fired as well, because you can't tell me that was an isolated incident with that one person. Everyone turns a blind eye. And so, yeah.
I'm going to say something quickly. I don't watch a lot of news. And a couple of weeks ago, before the whole thing happened, I see something, a quick picture of a white officer on a black man's head. But I thought it was just, as I scrolled through the picture, just I didn't think black or white. I just thought, oh, somebody getting arrested, that's all it is, and I'm not going to waste my time watching it. Yes. Well, then a couple of days later, somebody says, have you not heard what happened? There's this guy, that black gentleman, who was going to a bank, if I have my story correctly here, because I still am shocked, and they thought he was going to write a bad check, and because he's apparently going to write a bad check, this is how the guy ends up. First of all, even if the guy was going to the bank with a gun in his hand as a black man and he was going to rob it, no one deserves that. That's my mother's ideology. Because here's what I'm going to ask. What's wrong with him? Maybe there is something mentally wrong with him. And I don't mean because he's black, just because maybe there's something wrong with him. Yes. I feel sorry. My heart, honestly, breaks for those kind of people. It's sad to think that a human would treat a black man any differently. As much as there's two sides of me, right? The ego side wants to just kill them. How could you do something? They should all be fired. They should all be put in jail. From a legal perspective, they should be handled like everybody else. Yes. But there's a heart side of me that says, not to forgive, in the sense that they need help, Martin. Our society is sick, buddy. Oh my God, we need big help. If somebody who's going to cash a check, if I have my story right, and again, it doesn't even matter what the situation is. I don't care what color the person is. Nobody in the world deserves that. And then over and beyond that, I got to be honest, I have to ask, what kind of person, black, white, or whatever color they are, as an officer, and this happened to be a white one, because it could have been anybody, why would you do that to any human being? Why would you do that to any human being at all?
Right. There needs to be some level of assessment at the point when you're going to arrest somebody or have a conversation with somebody you pull over. That triage at that point should be able to be like, okay, this is a mental health issue. This person might need different supports. How is this going to end up? Are we thinking 3 steps ahead, or are we coming out with our hand on our gun waiting for this guy to run? Like, if they pat the guy down, he has no weapon on, and then you shoot him 3 times in the back as he's running away, we go back to that conversation right at the beginning, that fight or flight, the hormones, everything going off. Yep. Everything that's happening in our world right now, if I am pulled over and I've seen the last 3 people on my social media feed get shot when they were unarmed and they were whatever, and then you try and put cuffs on me, I'm going to try and, like, it's fight or flight at that point. I'm going to die anyway. I'm going to run because I'm going to die anyway. And then sure enough, the guy gets shot. We're missing something in this line. And really, you can't put it on the one police officer who pulls the trigger. You have to put it on the person above him that let this guy walk. You have to put it upon the person upon him who let him walk through his job doing these things. These guys all have prior accounts, prior complaints, and everyone turns a blind eye all the way up the chain.
Sorry, Martin, that's more reason why the ones who commit it obviously deserve what they deserve. But the guys on top who actually know, listen, that's called negligence in my eyes. And negligence is worse. Because if you don't know something and your team is doing something bad and I find out you did that and I never knew, I'm going to do something about it. And if I do, then I can do it. But if I know that it's been going on and I'm turning a blind eye, to me, you're being negligent. You actually let someone leave a house with a loaded gun knowing that they were going to go out there and possibly could shoot someone. You're damn right. I don't care how high up the chain goes. One life is worth it of 7 billion people. If it's only one life, I don't care who it is, because, and it's not the fact that it's one life, Martin. It's the fact that how it happened. It should never, ever in today's society. That's why I said I am shocked. And you just connected something which is brilliant. Like we started the conversation. Yes, I just said that how your brain thinks right now can affect your emotions, can affect your gut, can affect the way you think. It can affect the vagus nerve. It can put you in fight or flight. And then you add everything else that's been going on. We've been locked up. People are losing homes, jobs, money, stress from being everything else that's going on. People don't know where all this uncertainty on top. You add all those things into it. God, you have to imagine, you're right, Martin. It's not just physical anymore. People have to really think about when you're pulling someone over, the person doing the pulling over and then the person being in the car. But especially if I'm the authority, I have to say to myself, this guy might have just lost his job. This might have happened to him. This might be a black man I'm pulling over who just shot 5 guys, get shot for no reason at all. Because I got to be honest with you, I'm not a black man. I look like one in some ways. But I'm going to tell you, if I get pulled over right now, I'm as freaked out because I have to be honest with you. If it could happen with a black guy, it could happen with a white guy. Now, I'm not saying that will or wouldn't, but it scares me to think who's letting people take authority like that. And then it makes me even more concerned because I have many, many black friends and what I call family, truly. And I think, my friend has to drive in a car. Martin's got to drive on a car. And because he gets pulled over, he should worry that just because he's black, there's something extra. And me, just because I'm white, it doesn't even cross my mind. Why should you have to live with that stress every day? Right. Do you know how dangerous that is for your health? Extremely.
Yes.
So that's what breaks my heart for anyone under any circumstance, but especially right now, my friend. It's very, very hard on people emotionally, which means even mentally. This is what they're living with every day. So again, this is why I'm glad you're having these platforms. These conversations are coming out. I hope who's ever responsible, whoever has to do what they need to be doing to make things happen, does what they're supposed to. And I hope justice, well, I want to say justice is served. I want to say I hope the law does what it's supposed to, but I want to see justice. I mean, it has to be done. I apologize, Martin. I have many black friends, and I always try to put myself in everybody else's shoes. But you said a few things about things that have happened to you, and it really starts to make people think. So this is why it's important that you say those sort of things, because I thought to myself, I can't believe that Martin would go play basketball or somebody would show up and people would assume, well, he's black, that's what he does. He's black, that's what he does. Because, first of all, that's not true. It isn't. So maybe I'm rambling on, but I guess what I'm saying is it's hurtful to see that this is what I live in, because I told you, when I was 10 years old, I kind of thought, well, if there's prejudice in 20 years, it can't be around. In 30 years, it can't be around. It's 45 years later, and I don't know if it's worse these days, but we're at home, we're quarantined, we're grateful, me and my wife, for what we have here. We're comfortable, and to think some poor guy went out one day, and all he did was be a regular man trying to go do his own job, business, and maybe he was stressed, and whatever the reason was, he woke up dead 2 hours later. I mean, I don't even know the words.
And yeah, and we have like 5 minutes left here.
Okay.
And as we reflect on all these different things, these are the stresses that we bring as we walk into our gyms, as we do our online training and stuff. And Kenny, that's why I brought you in today. I know that you understand this from like on these different levels, and you just have some great insights. And can you just, in like 2 minutes, just give me just a few takeaways on how we still show up and be available for our clients in the midst of everything that's happening?
Yeah. So the first thing I always say is meet people where they're at. Okay, and that doesn't obviously when I'm speaking, but I'll say it. This has nothing to do with gender or age or anything. So first of all, always meet people where they're at. You don't know where someone's been, what someone knows. You just never know. If you always meet someone where they're at as a coach, so I'm telling coaches or the trainers showing up with clients, meet them where they're at. Please understand that the stress out there, the mental stress people have on them, take 5 minutes to speak to your clients, to just give them a sec to catch their breath. I think if we do that, and I think if we lead with our heart and think peace, I think in terms of how we approach our clients, or how my clients, which are the trainers and coaches who are approaching the consumers themselves, I think if we all follow that, if we show up that way every day, if I show up, Martin, and I say to myself, regardless of who this person is, let me meet them where they're at, let me remember what they're going through, and if I lead with my heart and think peace, then I think there's a conversation that I can have with you and I can have with anybody. And as long as people can communicate, I sound like I'm saying, I sound like I'm saying these things and I go, but these are things that are obvious, but they're not so common. Look, it's just simple common sense, man. Yes. Love and peace, and live with your heart, meet people where they're at, and if you communicate and speak with them, how can we not work anything out? There should never be a problem. And I don't care how fluffy that sounds, that's the world I want to live in. That's the world I want us to create. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Kevin, man, I've had utmost respect for you from day one, and today that utmost respect has been bumped up yet another notch. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, and I'm going to invite you for a Viper workout when we can connect together again. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, everybody out there. Martin, thank you so much. Don't stop doing what you're doing, my friend. And if there's ever anything, please reach out.
Thanks for listening to Core Conversation today. I encourage you to check out our website at personalvictory.ca/core conversations to keep the conversation going. We have our forum where we can talk about different issues. You can highlight any teacher trainings that you have. You can ask questions of our guests, and you can just find out who is coming up next. So join us there, and thanks again for listening to Core Conversations.